A hood covered her head while she moved through the trees. The sun had set, leaving her to push through the dark woods with only dim moonlight. She tightly pulled the cloak closed around her. There was a slight bounce to each step, carefully maneuvering over the fallen branches and large rocks. In the middle of the clearing, she stopped to soak in the moonlight. "Quite the show you're putting on, my dear." His voice was barely louder than a whisper. Stepping out of the shadows, a lean figure removed his top hat, the tips of his pointed ears catching the moon's light. He smiled. "Who are you hiding from?" "No one." The hood fell back, dark curls spilling out over her shoulders. Her dark skin was softer than silk and glowed as if a flame kissed her. Her eyelashes fanned out over her brown eyes. A smile crossed her face as she stepped closer to him. "It's good to see you again, my friend." "The same to you." Niall touched her cheek softly. "Have you brought him?" She opened the cloak, revealing the sleeping child in her arms. "Of course. I know how happy you get when you see him. There he is." Smith. Niall smiled wider. "Kenneth. What a beautiful boy." A silence fell over the clearing. Both looked down at the child, grinning as the boy slept. "I suppose you cannot stay long. You're just here to spy on me, aren't you?" "Not this time." Niall's fingertips brushed over her forehead. He locked eyes with her for a moment before he stepped back. "He wants to see you." "Well, that will never happen. I believe these meetings should stop, Niall. I knew you would be stubborn." A deep voice bounced through the trees. Out of the shadows Faustus appeared. He had chin-length dark hair and light blue eyes. He wore a navy cape over a striped suit with a lavender ruff underneath. She glared up at Faustus, standing tall to challenge him as he towered over her. "Faustus, has this new life taught you no manners? Address me properly." He growled at her. "You're just like your mother." Inhaling deeply, she corrected her previous remark. "Father." Faustus stepped forward, extending his arms. She did not step back, but she gave him a warning look. Faustus ignored her and slipped the baby boy into his arms. Slowly he rocked the child as he paced, gracefully stepping over pebbles. She watched every movement closely. This must be the little prince I've heard so much about. Faustus stroked the child's cheek. "He is no prince, Faustus." She folded her arms. "His father has returned home." "Yes, your precious warrior," Faustus smirked, his words drenched in sarcasm. He gripped the locket around her neck. Popping it open, Faustus groaned at the tiny photos of her husband and her son. "The war is not over. Has he abandoned the colon?" "He'd never. He would have died for his countrymen." She bit her tongue, refusing to say more. When Faustus looked at Niall, she inhaled and finished her thoughts aloud. "He's injured. They forced him to return home, but Kenneth and I could not be happier." Faustus gawked at her. "Is that why you have not healed him? You want him to stay in your humble home?" Her gaze steadily weakened. "Does he even know what you are? You do not even know what I am. You are my beautiful creation. A goddess. My princess," Faustus spoke confidently. "You've chosen this life for yourself when we both know you deserve much more. I will not even ask how you persuaded that human to marry you. Unless there is a secret you wish to share. I did nothing. I would never do that to him. He loves me, and I am happy with this life. Happier than I ever was in the others. You cannot possibly remember the others. Yet, I do." She looked at Niall. "Were you trying to keep certain memories from me?" Faustus stepped closer, caressing her cheek with his large hand and bringing her gaze back to him. "Your son is unique. You, my dear, have done the impossible." She pushed his hand away. "Women give birth all the time. But you are not any ordinary woman. I've watched you. Do not say that in front of my son." Faustus gawked at her, annoyed. He stayed calm, his voice a relaxing whisper. He collected his thoughts, calculating his next move with her. Die. 1,000 times. Over centuries. But this, he lifted the child, is a new accomplishment. He will be extraordinary like his mother. She took her child back, cradling Kenneth against her breasts. He is human, as is his father. I love them both. You need to accept that. The corners of Faustus's lips curled upward, his smile sinister. Do I? If you wish to see my child again. Yes. She adjusted her cloak to cover Kenneth. She turned and began her journey back through the trees. You will embrace what you are. No one can resist power. He shouted after her. Don't force my hand. When the woman returned to her home, she quietly put Kenneth in the basket she weaved for him. She removed her black cloak and draped it over a chair. Kicking off her shoes to not make a noise when she walked, she made her way to the bedroom. The door opened before she grabbed the knob. Evelina. Using a long, thick tree branch for support, her injured husband hobbled out of the bedroom. Adrian, what are you doing out of bed? She looped his arm over her shoulders. Slowly she turned him and walked with him towards their bed. You need to keep off that leg if you want it to heal. Are you well? I was worried. I could not find you or Kenneth. We're fine. Kenneth was fussy, so we went for a walk. It tires him right out. I do not like that you go out alone at night. Adrian let her fluff his pillow. We're in a war. It's dangerous. I can take care of myself. Evelina smiled at him. I know you can, but I will always worry. I know. She gasped when she saw the blood coming through the bandage on his leg. Adrian. You should have stayed in bed. I promise it looks worse than it is. She kissed his forehead. I'll go fetch some water to clean this up. Stay in bed. I'm warning you, Mr. Emerson. He chuckled, taking her hand in his. Whatever you demand, Mrs. Emerson. The tiny hairs on her arms and back of her neck stood when he kissed her knuckles. His finger circled her wedding ring. Adrian gave her butterflies when they met over 2 years ago when she was 18. Tingles still shot up her spine. It was the same intense feeling she felt that led to Kenneth's conception. Evelina remembered how nervous she was when she told Adrian she was with a child. She thought he'd run off, call her disgusting names and refuse the child. Instead, Adrian proposed to her in the middle of a plot of land. He purchased the 20 acres and together they built a home for their growing family. Kenneth was a few months old when they finally married. Months later, the colonies and redcoats began their war, and Adrian was called to fight. Adrian turned her hand over in his. He kissed her wrist, pulling her from her memories. His lips moved up the inner side of her arm. Adrian kept eye contact with her, their bodies leaning in closer. His hand tangled in her hair, but she pulled back before he could kiss her. I see what you're trying to do, Mr. Evelina stood. You're supposed to be resting. Adrian chuckled. I am in bed. You are not allowed to move. I will remain as stiff as a board. You, however, can move all you wish. Charming. She crossed her arms. I will return to clean your leg. Stay in bed, Adrian. Adrian let out a sigh in defeat. What about Kenneth? He is sleeping. The well is just outside. Evelina kissed his forehead. I promise I will not be long. She draped her cloak over her shoulders before picking up a pail. Evelina walked outside to the small well on the edge of their property. Tying the pail handle to a rope, she cranked the well's handle to lower it into the water. A rustling in the trees caught her attention. She slowed her movements, listening and watching the surrounding darkness. A twig snapped, and she quickly turned her head in that direction. Niall? Is that you? She asked in a loud whisper. Faustus? You cannot be here. Help! Please, help me. A man cried out from the trees. He emerged, hunched over and using his musket as a crutch. Blood dripped from his forehead and his blood-soaked hand held his side. He stumbled onto the property, falling onto the grass. Evelina ran over to him. Are you well? What happened? It was so fast. He breathed heavily. We never saw him coming. Some type of unspeakable evil. Evelina's heart raced. She knew exactly what had attacked the young man. Here. I'll help you.